Get started in a few minutes, everybody. We're just going to wait for a few more people to come into the room.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We're going to just start in just a few minutes with navigating the college process, how to complete grade applications and essays. Looks like we're holding at 45. Do you want to start or give it 2 more minutes?
Nope, let's get going.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Billy Moffitt from the Gail Borden Public Library, where I am director of Studio 270, our high school teen center and digital media lab. Today, in a partnership with Elgin Academy, they will be presenting an incredible program for our Navigating the College Process series. This is the last one in this series, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again because we're having a great turnout in our last program and this one as well. Remember that the Gail Borden Public Library is now open. We are open to the public in all of our locations and including the bookmobile you can see driving around Elgin as well. So feel free to stop by for any of your needs, your library needs. We have college information, college books, as well as databases that can be used at home with a Gail Borden library card and in the building if you don't have one. So if you have any questions at any time, please see me in Studio 270, and I'm going to give it away to Bonita to start us off.
Thanks so much, Billy. Good evening and welcome. My name is Bonita Goyce, and I'm the Director of Admissions and Marketing at Elgin Academy. I'm thrilled to have so many of you joining us this evening for what I'm sure will be a very informative session. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker for the evening. Dan Raffety is the Director of College Counseling at Elgin Academy. Over the years, Mr. Raffety has helped hundreds of students through the admissions process, and what you learn here tonight will help you join the ranks of students who have successfully applied for and been admitted to college across the country. Just a few housekeeping notes. We will be recording this session, and a link will be posted to the Elgin Academy website in the next few days. And I will send an email out to you all with a link to that. We will also have everyone muted throughout the presentation, but please feel free to enter any questions you might have in the chat, and Mr. Rafferty will address those throughout the presentation and at the end. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce Dan Rafferty.
Well, thank you very much, Bonita. So I'm going to try to walk everybody through some steps for great successful applications and then essays. Sorry, I'm having a little technical issue here. Hang on one second. Better. Can everybody see that? Can I get a thumbs up if everybody can see that? Fantastic. Okay. So before you begin a college application, first of all, I hope that you are very well informed about the colleges that you are applying to. I know that the situation that we face right now makes visiting college campuses pretty tricky, and that is usually a very important component for the college search. So during these pandemic times, the best thing to do is to gather as much information as possible from the college websites, from brochures. Colleges are offering virtual info sessions and tours. There's a lot of digital ways to take advantage of looking at college right now, and I would suggest that everyone does that. But once you've made up your mind, some other parts of the process are going to be to build a relationship with the colleges that you're most interested in. It is great to reach out to college representatives, college admissions counselors. It is their job to interact with prospective students and to give them as much information as possible. There are some schools, especially smaller colleges, that track demonstrated interest. And what that means is that they pay attention to whether or not a student has visited the campus. Again, that's a little tricky these days. But also if they've made contact via email, by attending online sessions, things like that. So I urge all high school students to build a relationship with the colleges that they are most interested in. Again, all schools have admissions representatives. If you go to the admissions page, actually the best thing to do is just Google the name of the school and then admissions representatives. And that'll usually take you right to that information. And I really encourage you, don't be shy. Reach out and get to know the admissions reps. Ask if there's interview opportunities. The more they know about you prior to the application process can be very beneficial to whether or not you're admitted. And also, the more you know about the school, the more that's going to be reflected in your application. So I would take advantage of any opportunity you have to interact with a college that you're interested in. The other thing before you apply is to be very well aware of the deadlines that the colleges have. There's a variety of different deadlines these days. I'm going to highlight some of the bigger ones. Early decision, that is a binding decision. That means that you agree that if you are accepted to that college, that you are going. Early decision applications are usually November 1st or November 15th, and they are a very big commitment. So if that's what you want to do, make sure that that school is absolutely your first choice and that you are ready to go there and no place else if you are accepted. Then there's early action. Early action is like early decision, except that it's not binding. It just means that you're going to get a decision, an answer from the college a little earlier. These are usually, colleges usually respond around Christmas time. Again, it is not a binding decision like early decision, but can give you an idea of what your options are a little earlier. Early action can be a wonderful opportunity, especially for students who are coming out of very strong junior years. But for those of you who might want some senior grades going into the college application process, you might want to wait for later deadlines. Another deadline to be very mindful of are priority deadlines. Priority deadlines mean that you get maximum consideration for merit scholarships. They're often December 1st, although every school does this a little differently. So please make sure you are well aware of what schools have which deadlines when. Then of course, regular decision, the classic usually between January 1st and February 1st, depending on the schools. And that means you'll get your decision in late March, usually mid to late March. By April, you'll get a decision. And then there are schools with rolling admissions, which means that they will basically accept applications throughout the year, sometimes well into the spring and even into the summer. So those would be the most flexible applications. But before you begin filling out an application, you want to determine which of these deadlines you're going to meet. Preferably, you want to know that at least a month, if not more, prior to the deadline, so that you've got ample time to work on what you need to work on. So these deadlines you should be very mindful of as you're considering the colleges that you're going to apply to. Beginning the application. So once you've determined where you're applying, first of all, make sure that you have a copy of your transcript available. I also highly recommend that you have either a resume or an activities list handy. Pretty much all applications are going to ask you to put in the clubs, the sports, service, jobs, things you've done to help your family. All of these are things that can be included in the activity section. And if you've got that information together ahead of time, that can be very helpful. Determine what application platform the colleges that you're applying to are using. So I'm going to highlight two of the better known ones. Common Application, which is a fantastic resource. There are over 800 colleges in the United States, as well as a few international schools who utilize it. It's a platform that's been available since at least the early 90s, possibly the late 80s. And it will make life very easy for you, particularly if you've got multiple schools who are on it, and chances are you do, because there are a ton of schools that use it. So I highly recommend that. Another widely available application is the Coalition application. I honestly have had students run into some problems with the Coalition application, so it's not my favorite. And in fact, there are some schools that use both. I would absolutely recommend that students use the Common App over the Coalition app if they can. But there are a few schools that are Coalition only. So if that's the case, take your time with it. But again, I do recommend the Common App if you can use that. Applications are going to vary from school to school in terms of the amount of work that you need to put into them. I'm going to go into a little more detail about that later when I talk about supplemental essays. But again, I highly recommend the Common App. Virtually all private, there's a few exceptions to this, but most private colleges use it, and many public universities as well. Two fairly local examples would be University of Wisconsin-Madison and the University of Michigan. And then there are also some schools out there that will just use their own application, or will let you choose between using their own application and the Coalition app, or their own application and the Common App. Again, if they are Common App, I highly recommend you use that for everything. There's no preference given if you use the Common App instead of a school's own application. They accept it equally. But to give you some very local examples of schools that are not on the Common App, all of the Illinois public colleges either are on their own application or the Coalition application. University of Illinois, for instance, will either use its own application or the Coalition app. Again, if you're just applying to U of I and not other Coalition application schools, I highly recommend you use U of I's regular application. The platform is a little easier. Illinois State and Northern Illinois also have their own applications. And in all of the cases of the Illinois state schools, they are self-reported. And I put that in all caps for a reason. Self-reported means that students are responsible for inputting all of the information themselves. They will need to have their transcripts in front of them, test scores in front of them, and they will need to input literally all of that information into the application. We don't send transcripts to University of Illinois, except at the end of the year if a student's going to matriculate there. They do not accept them. If I were to send it to U of I's admissions office, they would shred it. So that is an example of a school where a student really needs to be on, they should be on top of everything. But in particular, it's one where they're going to need to have all of their information available to them and to put it in themselves. To give you some examples of other kind of famous self-reported colleges, the University of California system is entirely self-reported as well. So again, make sure, I mean, you should have these materials anyway. You should have a copy of your transcript at the beginning of senior year. You should make sure that you've got a list of your activities, but know that they will be of the utmost importance on the self-reported applications. Make sure that you have created an application account well before the deadline, preferably at least a month, and that goes for all of them. Whether it's Common App, whether it's Coalition App, whether it's a school's own individual application, make sure that you've opened it, that you've created an account with it, and you've looked over what you need to do for it. You don't want to be doing this last minute, all right? You don't want to be doing this October 31st heading into a November 1st deadline. You want to know exactly what that application requires and how much work you're going to need to do. A big question is going to be whether or not the school has supplemental essays. So for schools that are Common App, you're going to have an overall essay that goes to all of the schools that you apply to. We call it the personal statement at Elgin Academy. You could call it the senior essay, whatever. But there will be one big one that you put in that goes to all of them. But some schools will also have supplemental materials. And you can determine that once you've added the schools onto your list. You go over to where it says My Colleges, you click down, and it'll show you the additional questions that the schools have, if they have them. And in some cases, those supplemental essays can be as much work, if not more work, than the overall essay that's required in all Common App applications. I also want to point out, sometimes they're going to say that those supplemental essays are optional. Ignore that. They are not optional. If you want to go to that college and you see anything that says optional, it is not optional. Take the time and answer the question. If you care about that school, if you want to go to it, you need to do all of the work that the application requires. So if you see optional, understand that it is not actually optional. There's a few schools that do that. I feel like it's kind of a test. But again, yeah, you should be completing all of the information that the school asks for. And while this isn't universally true, it is often true that the more selective the school, usually the more work the application requires, the more supplemental essays it will ask for. That's not always true, but it is very, very, very often true. And again, that also means if you're applying to highly selective schools, if you're applying to Northwestern or University of Chicago or the Ivies, your application, you will find, will probably take more work than some of the other schools that you're applying to. So definitely, if you've got schools like that on your list, you're going to want to take a hard look at those applications very early and look at what information they require. A big part of putting together your application is going to be listing the activities. Again, if you've already got a resume or an activities list in front of you, this is going to make this process that much easier. I'm going to refer this mainly to Common App, although there's definitely similar functions on the Coalition App and on some of the individual schools' applications as well. But what you want to do with this list is you want to prioritize what activities, clubs, service endeavors, sports, jobs, etc. You want to think about what's most important to you. What is something that really defines you, something that you maybe plan on doing in college. Whatever is most important to you, you want to lead with that. You want that to be at the top of your activities list. Common App is going to give you 10 spaces to put those activities again in. So make sure that you're highlighting, again, whatever is most important to you. There are some schools that will also let you upload a resume. Again, especially schools that are using their own individual applications. So having a resume done ahead of time can be very influential. Try to describe these activities in as much detail as possible. You don't necessarily have a lot of space. I think you got like 100 to 150 characters on the Common App. But you want to do the best you can to describe it. Now, obviously, for something like soccer or playing an instrument, you probably don't need to put as much detail into that. I mean, obviously, you want to highlight, if you've gotten any awards, what position you play, things like that. But what you really want to think about are activities that are special to your school. So for instance, at Elgin Academy, one of our main service programs is PADS, Public Action to Deliver Shelter, which is providing service to a local homeless shelter. And, I've had students just write in PADS and nothing else. And I'm like, guys, they don't know what that, they're not going to know what that is. You need to describe what the acronym stands for, and you need to describe what you've done as a part of that service endeavor. So remember that the people you're submitting this to don't necessarily know all of the things that are going on at your school. So if you've got a club like that or a service program like that, make sure that you spell out what it is. And as you complete the activity section, there's no one right way to do it. Some students will go for a more sort of bullet pointed way of going about it. Some will use complete sentences if they can fit that in. Either way is fine. However, whatever you do, I suggest that you be consistent with it. So if you're going to use the bullet point format, use that for all 10 activities. If you're going to use complete sentences, use that for all 10 activities. So there's not necessarily a right way to do it, but whichever style you pick, stick with it. Now let's move on to the essays. So there's a lot of different ways you can go with the essays, but what you really need to think about it as is an opportunity to let the colleges get to know you better. There's going to be probably several schools you apply to where you are nothing more than a stack of pages, or what's even more likely is like a file on a computer screen these days. So the more you can use the essay to tell your story, to show a school who you are, the better. So you want to focus on something that is unique to you, something that you can do, cut down to 650 words. That's the maximum amount for the Common App. I know the Coalition app recommends even smaller, between 500 and 550. But you want to take something that really explains who you are and put together 650 of the best words that you possibly can about it. Do not try to impress the college by using big words that you're looking up in a thesaurus as you're writing it. That's not going to help you. What you want to do is you want to communicate in your own voice and tell your own story and put it in your words. Now, obviously, make it grammatically correct and things like that. But this is not the time to show off the 10 vocabulary words that you just learned in English class the day before. You want to write using words that you are very comfortable with. Some essays to avoid, and this is from feedback that I've gotten from admissions reps throughout my career. Avoid the winning the big game essay. They've seen that a million times. They've also seen a lot of service trip essays. Sometimes there are unique ways of going about these things, but generally speaking, you kind of want to stay away from these. Obviously, highlight them, highlight the sports you played and highlight the service trips that you went on in the activities list. But know that you're going to be one of hundreds of students who are writing about that. So you want to think of something even more unique than those things. And the other thing to focus on is that it is your story. So if you're going to write an essay about your grandfather, that better ultimately be an essay about yourself and not just how wonderful your grandfather was. Again, the colleges are trying to get to know you, not the people that you know. So if you're writing about, interaction with family members or things like that, make sure that there's a lot of you in that essay and not just you talking about them, okay? And when you feel like you've got a good draft together, please make sure that that essay is edited by a parent, a college counselor, and or a teacher, or perhaps multiple responsible adults. But do not submit an essay that you have only looked over yourself. You should be getting feedback on the content and feedback on the grammar. So please make sure that there is someone you have to look over that essay with you. These are the prompts for the Common Application essay. There are 7 possible prompts. Some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. I won't go through all of these, but I will draw everybody's attention to the bottom one, to number 7. Share an essay on any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. So if you look through the first 6 prompts and you're like, I don't know what to do with these, well, you've got the option of basically writing whatever you want and applying it to prompt number 7. So I would take the time and look through these and see if any of them apply to you, because these prompts can give you the structure, a good starting point for your essay. But again, if you've got something that you really want to write about and you don't feel like it aligns with the first 6 prompts, number 7 will allow you to basically write about whatever you'd like. I'm not going to put the coalition application prompts up, but I will say they're very similar to the Common App, and they also have one that is basically like, if you don't like any of these prompts, please feel free to share whatever you want. So there's a very similar option in the coalition application as well. I do want to highlight this. Whoops. Okay, I do want to highlight the University of Illinois essay, as I'm sure there will be several applicants there. So again, they have their own unique application that you can use. And they are much more major specific, okay? This is not quite the same as the Common App essays that are allowing you to really pick and choose from your life experiences. U of I really wants you to focus in on what you intend to major in. So here it is: explain your interest in the major you selected and describe how you have recently explored or developed this interest inside and or outside the classroom. You may also explain how this major relates to your future career goals. If you're applying to the Division of General Studies, explain your academic interests and strengths of your future career goals. You may include any majors or areas of study you're currently considering. Limit your response to 300 to 400 words. So that means a Division of General Studies means that you're applying undecided. But otherwise, you want to explain what you think you're going to do with an English major, what you think you're going to do with a business major, what you think you're going to do with a computer science major, etc. And they have an additional essay too if you list 2 intended majors. So you could write one about, what you would do with a biology major, and the other one about what you would do with an environmental science major. But again, it's going to be a much more major specific essay than what you would see on the Common App prompts. Supplemental essays. So again, you will find these on the Common App or on the Coalition app. Some schools are going to require you to write additional, answer additional questions. Some of these are going to be very short. Sometimes they're a couple sentences, or even like answer in the form of a tweet. Some schools can get pretty funky with what they ask for on supplements. And then in other cases, you're going to be working on essays that are as labor intensive as the overall Common App essay. Often they can be college specific. For instance, Northwestern basically has a why Northwestern essay. It's actually a little wordier than that, but you get the point. You basically are telling them, why Northwestern would be your first choice and why it's the best school for you. Others can be much more unique. University of Chicago is famous for some very interesting supplementary essay questions. Some of them were actually written by University of Chicago students. And to give you two examples of that, one was, "Where's Waldo really?" And another one is, "Cats have 9 lives, Pac-Man has 3 lives, and radioactive isotopes have half-lives. How many lives does something else, conceptual or actual, have, and why?" So that would give you an idea of what you were in for if you were to apply to University of Chicago. And in both of those cases, those are pretty long essays. I think they're asking for like 500 words. So again, with some schools, the supplemental essays are going to be as much work, if not more, than the personal statement on the common application. So again, this is why I highly recommend that once you know you are going to apply to a school, that you scope out its application. You add it to Common App if it's on Common App, or Coalition App if it's on Coalition App, or if it's a school with its own individual application, you go and take a look at it and understand what you were going to have to do to complete it. Because these do take time. They need to be carefully edited. They need to be carefully thought through. And you definitely don't want to be doing these the night before or even a couple of nights before. I would say you want at least a month, preferably more, but at least a month to start preparing these. And before you submit your application, whether we're talking about the essays or the overall apps themselves, please read over the entire application and your essays carefully. You can usually turn them into PDFs. You can certainly do that with the Common App. So if you would rather review a print format of it rather than looking at it as on a screen, feel free to print it out and go over it the old-fashioned way. Make sure you have a trusted adult. Again, read over the application as well before you submit it. Again, that could be a college counselor, a teacher, a parent. You could have several eyes on it if you would like, but please do not submit an application without somebody looking over it. Even for stuff as silly as putting your phone number in or putting your address in, because if you make an error there, that's going to be problematic. So definitely make sure that you've got multiple sets of eyes. I try to look over pretty much every application that Elgin Academy students send out. I'd say I'm probably like 97% on that most of the time. But again, do not submit it without looking it over carefully yourself and with a trusted adult. On the school end, make sure that you have requested your transcripts and recommendation letters to be sent to your school. If you have not asked teachers for recommendation letters at this point, I would start doing that very soon. And if the college does not allow self-reported test scores and you plan to use them for your application, you must request that they be sent by College Board or ACT several weeks. I'd say at least 3 weeks before the deadline. You don't want to be worried about that as you apply. Now, this is a very weird year for that. So many colleges are test optional because students are being shut out of standardized tests. So you will more than likely have the option to apply test optional. So this may not apply to you. But if you are sending test scores, And if they are not self-reported, so meaning some schools will let you just self-report them on the app and then you send them if you wind up matriculating. But if they require you to send them directly from College Board or ACT, again, make sure that you've taken care of that several weeks ahead of time. And also know that there's a fee involved sending it from College Board or ACT. I think that completes my slides. So now I'd like to open it up to any questions from the audience.
Great, and at the moment, we don't have any questions in the chat. If anybody does have a question, we appreciate you putting it there.
Mr. Raffety, can I ask a question quick?
Please.
So with schools going test optional,
Yes.
if you do take a standardized test, what would prompt you to send it? What kind of score are you looking for? What do you think would be helpful versus hurtful?
Yeah, great question. I would take a look at what the average test scores are for that school. Every school is gonna list that, except for schools that are now test blind. There are 60 colleges right now that are not accepting test scores at all. Okay. Dickinson College, Reed College. The University of California schools are like that for California residents, but that wouldn't matter for Illinois students. But yeah, what I would do is take a look at what the average scores are at those schools. And if they are at or above, then certainly feel free to send them. If they are below, then I would say don't do it. It's not gonna help your application. So again, if you're at or above their mean scores, they'll all kind of list a range. And again, I would also say if you have any questions about that, ask your college counselor, ask your school counselor what they think. But you can also find that information on the school's websites for sure. But again, yeah, if it's at or above, go ahead and send it. If not, I would say don't do it.
Okay.
And definitely be mindful if the school is test blind. Again, it's not a lot, but there are a few out there.
There's a few. We do have a couple more questions in there now. I'm going to skip the first one. We'll come back to that in a minute. It says, if you do take a test, you have to submit the score.
No, not unless it is the rare school that is still requiring it. The only major one that I know of is, I believe, the University of Florida and possibly all Florida public schools are still requiring them, but I wouldn't be surprised if that changes in a few weeks, because schools have been going test optional left and right. It's been kind of a domino effect since lockdown began last March.
Okay.
But no, you don't.
Okay, another question about scholarships. Can you talk a little bit about scholarships and applying for those?
Okay, so the first thing is everybody, as I mentioned earlier, be very mindful of priority deadlines. All right, if a school is listing a priority deadline, that is the date by which they will give you maximum consideration for merit aid. A lot of times that's December 1st, but that could be school by school. So that is something that students should definitely pay attention to on the school's website. So make sure you hit the priority deadlines. For need-based financial aid, the FAFSA is going to go live October 1st. So students and their families should begin filling that out shortly afterwards. You'll need to have your tax forms available. That is not I want to clarify that October 1st is not the deadline. It is merely when it becomes available for this year. Each school will have its own financial aid deadline, and students should be wary of that as they look at the college admissions websites as well. And then for outside scholarships, the best resource that I recommend is called FastWeb, fastweb.com. It's like monster.com for scholarships. And it will put students in touch with literally thousands of scholarships that they can apply for. But the main thing is the most money will come from the schools themselves. So I highly recommend that students are aware of priority deadlines if the colleges have them. I know that at Elgin Academy, we also keep a list of scholarships in Naviance. I try to draw students' attention to scholarships that come. Sometimes I'll get mail, I'll get emails of scholarship opportunities, and I'll send those out. For students at other schools, they should check in with their college counselor and see what scholarships they have listed. But again, the priority deadlines and the need-based financial aid are going to be the big ones to make sure that you're meeting the deadlines for.
Great.
And there's a lot of local organizations that give out scholarships that meant there are very few applicants for.
Yes.
So don't feel that it's not worth filling out something for $1,000, because that $1,000 could go really far. Because there's a lot of money that's going unclaimed for scholarships, especially in the local area.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, a lot of Rotary clubs have scholarships for their local townships, things like that. Yep.
Okay, if application fees are waived, are you still able to do the Common App?
Yes.
That was easy. Let's see. Regarding essays, if speaking to work experience, is it better to focus on why you chose the job, what you learned on the job, how it applies to your future? Do you give glancing mention to each of these elements or select one and focus on that?
Okay, can you repeat that for me, please? That's a great question.
Yep. If speaking about work experience, is it better to focus on why you chose the job, what you learned on the job, or how it applies to your future, or touch on all three?
Well, that's a great question. I would say what you learned from the job is going to be the most important. Although all of those are things that could definitely be addressed if you've got the space for it. But I think what you learn from it is probably what a college admissions office is going to want to hear the most about. And that's kind of a trend with a lot of the essays, is showing your growth, showing, what with a job or any kind of experience, how you've grown from it. So I think that would probably be the most important part of that. That's a great question.
This is from a student. I have already given my SAT scores, scored 1330. Will I not be able to submit my score? Not sure what that means.
I'm not entirely sure what that means. You've received the score. That means it's going to exist for, I think, at least 5 years.
Maybe they mean if it's blind, you can't submit it if they're blind.
If the school is test blind, they will not look at it at all. Okay. It doesn't matter.
If it's optional, you can, though.
Yes, test option. Again, optional gives you the option to do it or to not do it. So if it's a test optional school, you can absolutely report that score, and I would suggest that you do. But if it is one of the few schools that are test blind, no, you could not.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Someone asked about recording. We are recording the session, and we will be posting it on the Elgin Academy website. I'll also send out a link to anyone who registered. Okay, what if you don't really reach the benchmark for a certain school? I'm assuming for test scores or GPA.
I mean, you have to think about whether or not it's worth it to you to do it. If you feel like you're not hitting the benchmark, if you're like, I can't live with myself if I didn't take the shot, then I would say go ahead and do it. Sometimes you may not want to pay the application fee. Sometimes they can be close to $100 depending on the school. So that might be another consideration, is the cost of it. But you can always try. But I definitely do a lot of work with students to make sure they understand what their odds are going to be at different schools. So if you really feel like you're missing the mark, it may not be worth it to do it. But again, if you feel like you're going to regret not taking that shot, then go ahead and do it, I would say. It's a good question.
How about some tips for high school juniors? What should they be doing now?
Great question. Okay. So Yeah, definitely take advantage of online opportunities. Check your emails. Look for opportunities with college fairs. There was a big one that just happened this past weekend, but there will definitely be other opportunities. There are schools that are going to host virtual open houses, virtual tours, Q&A sessions with alumni. So be on the lookout for stuff like that, because usually what I would say to do is meet with, the colleges that are coming through the school. At Elgin Academy, that's happening virtually right now. And unfortunately not as often as we would usually do it, given the changes, given the situation. I'm not sure, I can't speak for other schools, what they're doing to host virtual sessions, but if they are, definitely take advantage of that. So do start getting your feet wet with what's out there. And if you know some schools that you're interested in, then check out their websites, reach out to their admissions representatives, look out for opportunities to connect online. And of course, junior year is pretty much the most important year academically. So make sure that you are focusing on your academics and finding ways to keep yourself involved. I know can be weird with the situation we're in right now, but anything you can do virtually to show initiative, take advantage of it.
That kind of ties into this question. If a school is your top choice, but you don't sign up for early admission because your grades aren't where you want them to be, is there a difference between how they look at your application depending on when you send it in?
In many cases, yes. There can be a lot of preference to early decision. In some cases, there's preference to early action as well, although that's not usually quite as dramatic. But there are definitely cases where schools are filling as much as 50% of their admitted class from early decision. However, you got to balance that with how you're doing academically. And if you don't think you have any kind of shot applying early decision, whereas after another semester in some, highly rigorous classes, you're going to show improvement, it might be worth it to wait. But that's a question I'd almost rather answer on a case-by-case basis. It's a great question. But yes, schools will often give preference to early decision. However, students should not do that unless they're ready to do that. And that is both on the academic side and also on the financial side. Because if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, and maybe that's not the best decision if you want multiple financial aid packages to choose from. So I can't give a great overall answer to that. Some of it's got to be on a case-by-case basis, but I can say that yes, a lot of schools do give preference to early decision applicants, and in some rare cases, early action as well.
Okay, we'll take just a few more. Any advice on how to use Naviance with the Common App to send in letters of recommendation?
So is this from an EA parent by any chance?
I can't tell.
Okay. So if your school uses Naviance, Common App and Naviance connect. And on our end, we only send our materials through Naviance. Nothing on the transcript or letter of recommendation side should be sent on Common App. I think that answers the question. But if you're at a school that doesn't use Naviance, then Common App is going to be the mechanism by which letters are sent for some places. But speaking as a Naviance school, the only thing that's sent over Common Application should be the student's application itself, and that letters and transcripts are sent on our end over Naviance. I hope that clarifies that question.
Okay. So we have a question about FAFSA and scholarships. Can you clarify what FAFSA is and
It's
And
the
that
federal application for need-based financial aid.
so it's not merit scholarships, it's need-based.
No, although sometimes schools are more likely to give merit scholarships to students who have completed the FAFSA. So it's pretty much always a good idea to submit the FAFSA, even if you don't think you're going to get a whole lot of aid. So we recommend that everybody do it.
Okay. When do you apply for scholarships in comparison to applying to colleges?
Okay, so at a lot of colleges, the deadline itself is going to be the application for scholarships. But there are cases where schools will have scholarships that are away from the app. Sometimes they'll invite you to apply for them. Sometimes you'll find them on their admissions and financial aid pages. And those do sometimes have their own deadlines. For instance, I've got a student who's applying for an October 15th deadline at Michigan Tech. So you want to pay close attention to the college's admissions and financial aid page to see if they've got scholarships that are away from their usual deadlines and or require an additional essay or an additional letter of rec or something like that. So again, that's kind of a case-by-case basis, but always make sure to read through the admissions and financial aid pages of any school that you are applying to.
Great. Okay, we'll do one more. Our letters of recommendation, got letters from 11th grade teacher. Is it important to get one from your 12th grade teacher?
Colleges almost always say that they prefer junior year to every other year. So if both of your recommenders are coming from junior year, that's great. That's not to say that they won't look at senior year teachers or they wouldn't look at a sophomore year teacher. But colleges traditionally look at junior year as when you're doing the work that most mirrors what you would do in college. And those teachers have had you for a full year as opposed to, a matter of months over senior year. So I would prioritize junior year teachers if you can. Again, I know there can be exceptions to that, but junior year is usually the sweet spot for getting recommendation letters.
Okay. How about does that teacher need to be in the field you're looking to study?
No.
Okay.
Not usually. I mean, there are cases, I guess, if you're applying to an engineering program, if you're applying to STEM stuff, I would make sure that you've got a math or science teacher, but they don't both need to be from that area. Okay. In fact, if they give you a preference, they will say, we want one humanities and one STEM. That's kind of the classic way to get recommendation letters. Obviously, again, there can be exceptions to this, but that's kind of the gold standard. And so, no, it does not have to be from the career that you're going into. What you want is the teacher that you've done the best work with, who knows you, possibly somebody that you've had for clubs and activities or has coached you. But really what you want is the best possible letter. And I would prioritize that over career specific stuff.
Okay. I missed a couple here. If you're using the Common App, do all the schools you apply to see the other schools you've applied to?
That's a great question. I think the answer is no, but I could be wrong. I think the answer is no. But colleges do pay attention if they can. They may ask you other colleges that you're applying to. But long story short, I wouldn't worry about it. It's not, I wouldn't worry about that at all.
Okay. Does getting free lunch at high school give you any advantage of getting more or less tuition assistance? Do they know anything? Does it tie together at all?
It can definitely get application fees waived.
Okay.
As well. I believe it can also allow test scores to be sent free of charge
Okay.
from SAT and ACT, from College Board and ACT. I am sure that it would heavily factor into the need-based financial aid process with the FAFSA. I'm certain it would. But yeah, there's even a spot on the Common App where you can check a box related to that. And often application fees will be waived as a result of that.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's everything. I hope I didn't miss anything else. I want to thank everyone for coming. Billy, thank you so much. Would you like to give your contact information? I apologize. Oh, we just got 2 more messages, but Billy?
Yes, I'll tape it in the box. I am Billy Moffitt, the Director of Studio 270 at the Gailbourn Public Library, and we're also here to assist you in any way that you need. A librarian is a good source to help you with your essay as well if you want another look over. Don't forget about your librarian at the Gailbourn Public Library or any neighboring library that you are a member of, and your school library. We're always here to help and have a lot of resources available, including books on college, books on college life, financial aid scholarship books, databases to help you practice if you do want to take the AC test. We do have the Gale Testing and Education Reference Center, and we also have access to tutor.com that allows you to do timed practice tests with that just exclude the essay portion. So you can go in and do it with a Gailbourn library card from home, or in any of our buildings, you can do it without a library card.
Wonderful. So this was supposed to end at 7:30. So Dan, I'm going to throw you 2 more questions.
Okay.
How do 504 plans work in college?
I don't know.
I can.
Mr.
Hi, I'm Doug Steck. I'm the assistant head of school for academic affairs. My advice, and this is similar to some of what Dan has said so far, is the best people to answer that question will be the people at the particular college. All colleges have good student services programs. Often you can find information about them on websites, and if you can't find that on their website, please ask the admissions office. Speaking from the end of someone at a high school, Elgin Academy, at times we help transfer information to colleges when a student requests us to do that. But really, the student and the family need to initiate the conversations about a potential 504 with the college. That's not something that a school does on behalf of a student. So again, my advice is to work with admissions reps, ask the question, and again, I'm sure that a lot of colleges these days have wonderful services available for students.
Great. Okay, last question, I promise. Is there any way to waive application fees if you don't qualify for free lunch or other things like that?
Reach out to the admissions office. Find out who the admissions rep is. Write them an email explaining as best you can the situation, and they'll probably work with you.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Mr. Rafferty. It was great. Lots of information, lots of things to take in. Thanks everyone for joining us. Our contact information is up there. Billy's is in the chat. As I said, we'll be posting the recording on our website in the next few days, but I will send a link out to anyone who's registered, so you'll know when that is up. So thanks everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye.